guys have been working together as well, man. You become a vital role in our little conglomerate as well, man. So, yeah, I don't know if I've ever asked you this. So I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna do some interviewing of my own. What brought you to Steam or Hive in the first place?
My story is a little different. I dropped out of college. Now I'm a farm boy from Wisconsin, and my parents sent me to college, although they made me pay for it. It was like it wasn't an option. I had to go because it was understood. I felt that blue collar work was not the way. I was always the smart kid, good at math. That's kind of the way I was the smart kid, good at math. And so they said, you gotta go. You gotta go because that's how you succeed in this world. And it was about 7 semesters in that I lost. I lost, like, depression. I got depressed. I learned things about the world, things that, my whole worldview was turned upside down by reading and understanding and discussions. And at one point, I had a vision of the future of the cubicle I was training myself into. And I said, I got to get out of this place. And I dropped out of college. And I had studied Spanish in high school 6 years. I had taken a semester or two in college, and I had the summer job, and so I got like my check from the summer job. I think it was $800, and I looked. I said, I got to get a plane ticket. I'm getting out of the country, and I looked at if Spain. I speak Spanish. Let's go to Spain. I heard Europe had trains and stuff. You could go around, and so Spain, $2,200 round trip ticket. I was like, oh. So then I was like, okay, a little closer. How about Peru? I've heard of Peru. $1,300. Oh, I didn't want to buy a one-way ticket. Like, I wasn't suicidal. I just wanted to get out of for a while, and walk around and figure it out. So I don't know why, but that my next search, I was like, Colombia. I don't know if I don't know why, but $289. I grabbed that round trip ticket. I think it was 3 clicks. Clack, clack, clack. I'm going to Colombia. I don't know anything about Colombia. And that was the moment I told my parents. I had already dropped out. They didn't know. They didn't have to know. They weren't paying for it. They made me pay for it. They indebted me. No, I indebted myself because they told me it was the right thing to do. And I told them, hey, guys, I've dropped out and I'm going to Colombia. And it was a very unique moment in my life. It was hurtful to my parents. They didn't understand at that time. My mom, who was my first on board, we'll get to her later in the story, but she cried, I think, for a few days. And she told me she loved me. My dad said to me that he thought I was an idiot and that I was dead to him because he couldn't live imagining if I was alive or dead. So it was just easier for him to imagine I was dead to him. And so it was, but I stood firm. I said, I got to do this. It's my life now, right? I think I was 20. It's now my life, so got to do it. And so I went to Colombia. I got some gear before I went. I got camping gear because I'm going to the jungle, right? I got like pots and pans and a tent, and I got some different things. And I arrived to Bogota. And it was the biggest city I've ever seen. It's a city of 9 million people. I'm in the middle of the city with a bunch of camping gear. This like white dude. Okay, so on the plane, I'm practicing my Spanish, because like even with 8 years of studying Spanish, I was, very rusty, slow. I couldn't seem to understand people very well. I was always saying, más despacio, por favor. I was always telling them to please talk slower. But I started chatting up these 2 kind of older ladies, I don't think they were elderly, but I was 20, so they were older ladies. And I was just chatting them up, practicing my Spanish because I'm going to go camping in the jungle, And we arrived at this huge city, this big old airport. And, I don't know. I'm kind of nervous, but I saw them on the way out and I said, hey, do you need any help with your bags? And they said, sure. And so I helped them with the bags to their car, and they said to me, what are you, where are you going? And I said, I'm just going to walk around and see what there is to do. I thought I would try to get out of the city, but I'm just going to see. And they're like, oh my God, you're going to die. This crazy gringo, he's going to die in the streets. No, don't you have any contact? Don't you know anyone? And it just so happened that before I left, my grandfather had told me to contact his kind of girlfriend, and because she had an old housekeeper, an ex-housekeeper that was from Colombia. And so we went over to her house, and we called the ex-housekeeper, and she was in Texas, but she had a niece, and we called, and she sent me the email of the niece. So I had emailed the niece, and the niece said, I'm in Cali, but I got a friend in Bogota. And so I had, just so happened in my front left breast pocket, I had a phone number of my grandpa's girlfriend's ex-housekeeper's niece's friend. And I said, well, I know this person. And this lady snatched that number so fast. Beep, 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 beep. And what I remember was she said, I got this crazy gringo here. He's going to die in the streets. I'm taking him to your house. Where do you live? And they took me to this girl's house. Such a nice girl. She taught me how to use the bus. She taught me how to catch the bus, how to read the map. And she said, the second day, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. The city is kind of expensive. I only had $80 left. I had converted it at the airport. I had $80. My return flight's in 9 months. I have $80. And she said, well, why don't you get a job? And I said, well, what? I'm in another country. What are they going to pay me to do? Isn't there people around here? Don't they hire their own people to do the things that need to be done? And she said, well, be an English teacher, dummy. And I was like, oh, that's probably a good idea. So I got a job. I called up some places, and a lot of, apply online and the website. Okay. And I called the next one, and there was this guy, and he was like, oh, my God, can you come in tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, I'll be there tomorrow. And I took the test, the English test. I failed it. But he liked me. He said, you've been studying economics. You've got the lingo. You've got the vocabulary. I want you. I'll teach you the grammar. No problem. I'm going to teach it to you. Because I have these big companies that are, these are my clients. And these middle managers and upper management, they need to travel to the United States of these multinational companies. They need to travel. And they need to speak English in their presentations, their PowerPoint presentations. And okay, great. And so, the first 6 months, I was elbowing it up with upper management for multinational corporations in Colombia, helping them give their presentations. I probably learned as much there with them about business as I did in business school. But that day, after I failed the test, he took me in, and I sat in a room waiting, for some paperwork, and this beautiful, amazingly beautiful girl walked in, and she was handing me some paperwork, and she said, hi, nice to meet you. And I said, oh, my gosh. And she speaks English, and so later that day I asked her, where, she says I asked her out to lunch. I said, hey, where to eat lunch around here? Anyways, this is now my wife. I met her the first day at that job, and she's from a small town. We connected, and we started homesteading. We started without land. We started, I have a friend who just started the dumpster diving community on Hive. But we started out just scrapping it up. I eventually, after 2 years of working in Colombia, I went back to university. I validated I got credit for the crazy dropping out I did. They gave me credits. I have a degree in Spanish language and literature now. And now that I was 24, I was eligible for the Pell Grant. So I got the Pell Grant. I went back for 2 semesters. But I kept thinking about that pretty girl. And so I went for 2 semesters. I got the Pell Grant, and then I started studying sociology at a distance. I went back to Colombia, and, in the United States, the Pell Grant wasn't enough. It was help. But in the small town of my girlfriend, w- there were four of us living on my Pell Grant. And so that was my first eye-opening, like lower the cost of living. And we continued to use that strategy, lower cost of living. And we scraped together some money, and I went to my grandfather, who always supported me. He was a farmer, and I'm a farmer at heart. I worked with him on the farm since I was 11, and I said, Grandpa, I want to buy a farm. We had gotten married at that time, or we were about to get married. I said, we got to get a farm. We've been working on other people's farms. We've been visiting. We've been learning. We want to get a farm. And so we had scraped together a little bit of money. My grandpa said, no problem. And he loaned me some money at 9% interest. Oh, God, I love my grandpa, but like my family was always like bootstraps, always blue collar, And so we bought the first farm, and we were poor. My gosh, we were coffee farmers that were trying to transition to permaculture. There was no money. It was every year the coffee gave less because we weren't fertilizing it. And like it was getting to the point where I didn't know what to do. And I was starting to look at other options. What I had done is I had started to put together a WordPress blog about my experiences. And I had spent in 2 years, I had installed the lamp stack. I had learned how to use servers. I had learned a little bit of code in a half a dozen different languages. I'd won a Visual Basic coding competition in high school, but I learned some things. But in 2 years, I had managed to put out 4 blog posts, but I had managed to become a mediocre sysadmin. Right? I had only done 4 blog posts in 2 years about the farm. But when I started looking into the crypto, one of the ones that they say, check out Steem. So I looked at it, and it wasn't about the money, man. I was like, oh my gosh, my lamp stack. You mean they're going to host this for me and I can just focus on writing? That was what got me into Steem. Sorry to go off the rails there, but I got into Steem because they would host my blog. I started writing about the bananas, and I won a competition from the Marky Mark for a 500 HP delegation about a banana post, about cleaning my bananas. Those are my first blogs on Steem, are bananas. And so that's how I got in, man.